My body's aching all the time. I got the buzz, but not the high. Don't need a trip to know how long, till the milk and honey will be gone. I ain't that busy anymore. I barely make it out the door. Not that I'd rather be inside. I'm taking shelter for my life. 'Cause when the grass turns to brown, I look out my window and bow my head. With every flower that prays for the rain to fall from the heavens. And when the birds circle round, I feel even closer to the end. But when the bees go dying, I know I won't be far behind. Oh, when the grass turns to brown, I look out my window and bow my head. With every flower that prays for the rain to fall from the heavens. And when the birds circle round, I feel even closer to the end. But when the bees go dying, I know I won't be far behind. Oh, when the bees go dying, I know I won't be far behind. Well, I once knew a man from the shores of Cape Cod, a man who called everyone babe. We met in the mystic and might have made love if through the morning I'd stay, but I could not stay. So we drank vino verde, went to the water, and took off all of our clothes. He said, I can see Portugal from here. I see Miss Somalia by the pier. So by the light of constellations and the voice of Rodriguez we sailed. Your father was born a fisherman's son, and your mother had red hair like mine. And I knew from the way that we mirrored each other, our histories came as no surprise. Still I was not wise. So we smoked marijuana at the top of Old Churro and sang to the infinite sea. You said I can see Portugal from here. I see my grandfather by the pier, so by the light of a golden sunset and the songs of ancestors we sailed. Oh, we sailed. Oh, those were the days before the long cataclysm, an erosion not quite unforeseen. Now yesterday falls like an age in slow motion as glaciers give way to the heat, and so do we. Well, the last time I saw you, we were caught in a landslide as our love turned to fossils and bones. He said, I can see Portugal from here. I see my beloved by the pier, so by the light of adoration and the ghosts of our memories we sailed. Oh, we sailed. Skinny, skinny in love over you. Punch me a hole or two. Why am I so frail? Maybe I should just buy a brand new belt. But still, I am so poor. I'll take a hammer and nails and knock on your door. 'Cause I'm skinny, skinny in love over you. Punch me a hole or two. Oh, you worry me so thin. It's like I'm losing myself and you're with him. So before I disappear, another night so you know that I'm still here. 'Cause I'm skinny. Skinny, skinny in love over you. Punch me a hole or two.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at home. We are here at the Creative Alliance bringing you live our show called Of Substance, stories about our complicated relationships with drugs and alcohol. Before we go on, we want to give a big thank you to Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon, whose music is amazing and is a great beginning to what promises to be a powerful show. So the reason we're doing this show tonight and the reason that our partner organizations have come together to support this is because drug and alcohol use touches everyone, regardless of race, gender, age, any other kind of division we think of. This touches everyone. And we at the Stoop and the partner organizations we're working with tonight believe that sharing personal stories is a way to reduce stigma and build community and provide education and inspiration and motivation around all sorts of issues. And tonight, it's issues of drug and alcohol use and abuse. Jessica, by the way, I meant to introduce myself. I'm Lara. This is Jessica. We're the Stoop. And Jessica is going to introduce our first storyteller.
Yep, absolutely. So we are excited here to be here tonight at Creative Alliance. Just so everyone at home knows, we are practicing all of the safe COVID protocols because Creative Alliance has pivoted beautifully to help the artists in Baltimore figure out how to still do some aspect of live performance and build a virtual audience. So the people along on the ride with us tonight are all going to share their stories, and we're taking good care of them to keep everyone safe. So even though we don't have masks on, we are wearing them when we're not in front of the microphone. So the first person who has agreed to share their true personal story on the theme of substance tonight is Mike Moran. He's a Baltimore-based comedian, improviser, podcaster, writer. He's just a really good, talented guy. He says that his comedic stylings are more kind of stupid smart. And tonight he's not going to be doing stand-up, but instead telling a true personal story. Please welcome Mike Moran.
For most people, alcoholism seems to take years or even decades to develop, but for some reason with me, for reasons I'm still not sure, it all happened at once. I was 14 and it was the first time I was able to have more than one beer. And somewhere inside of that second beer, a switch flipped, and all the fears and anxieties that I'd been carrying around just lifted from my shoulders, and this awkward, quiet, polite kid was suddenly the life, going around shaking hands and making jokes and talking to people. And it was fun, it was fun in those early days. Now, fast forward 7 years later, and I'm alone in a hotel room with an empty bottle of vodka. Because I had been to several rehabs, several jails, many emergency room visits, and many psych ward stays. I wasn't able to take care of myself, so the people who cared about me were always having their eye on me. So if I wanted to party the way I wanted to party, I needed to go away from people. So I thought it would be a great idea to rent a hotel room and get a bottle of vodka. And one night and one bottle of vodka turned into 2 nights and 2 bottles of vodka. And I'm sitting there on the floor waiting for the liquor store to open, trying to figure out how I can make it 3 nights and 3 bottles of vodka. What would happen was, when I was sober, momentarily sober at that time, this sleazy lawyer would come out of me, and his job was like to defend my drunken self, like he was in charge of PR, and he was the minister of disinformation. And he was in charge of damage control and finance, because I don't know how I, at that time, would have money for a hotel, but this lawyer was so good, he would find a way, if it meant keeping the party going. And so I'm sitting there negotiating on what I need to do, what lies I need to tell, what things I need to get into place to continue this very fun party. And as I'm sitting there, I go through what I think a lot of alcoholics are familiar with, and it's that feeling of when the booze is gone, the liquor store is not open yet, the horrible sun is starting to shine through the blinds, and the inebriation is wearing off. And the funny thing was, this particular run was not that bad. I wasn't in jail. I wasn't in the hospital. I hadn't embarrassed myself. I hadn't hurt anybody. I wasn't bleeding, believe it or not. Other than the people who cared about me were probably worried about me. This had gone relatively smoothly, and I said, "Well, I guess this is the successful way for me to drink." I shut myself away from the world. I don't have a cell phone, because this is before cell phones were necessary. And I drink so hard and fast that I pass out before I can leave and go cause any trouble, And as I'm sitting there and that horrible sun is coming up in my eyes, I'm overwhelmed with that. Even though things went okay, I'm overwhelmed with that horrible emotional hangover that comes after the drunk. The physical hangover is bad enough, but what really got me was just that empty feeling that comes when the buzz leaves and all the emotions start coming back, and I start thinking about all the people I've hurt and all the damage I've done, and just how pathetic and embarrassing my existence had become. And it was at that moment, I think, that I realized I don't have a drinking problem. Everybody else has a problem with my drinking. I love my drinking. I love every second of my drinking. What I have a problem with is sobering up. There's just no other feeling like that for me. It's the feeling of death. And it probably should have occurred to me a long time before, but for some reason that day, I just realized I'm never going to be able to escape this feeling. Even when things go okay, I got to sober up sometime. And, I just thought, well, I guess I can go get another bottle of vodka, or I can admit that I'm one of these alcoholic people and that I need to try my best to never touch another drop again. And I didn't touch another drop again to this day. It's such a simple concept. Just don't put booze in the hole in your face, Mike. That's all you got to do. You're not even doing something. You're just not doing something. And yet it was so difficult for me because the nature of my addiction was that my disease had me convinced that I was never going to have fun again. I was never going to laugh again. And more than anything, I was terrified of being bored. I just thought that living sober would be a very boring, mundane, depressing existence. And what I found is that there are things more satisfying and fulfilling in life than instant gratification. The discomfort of sobriety, and there was a lot of discomfort, is hard, but on the other side, I came out stronger than I ever thought I could be. We tell people this lie when they get sober. We tell them it's going to be all right. You're going to be all right. But if you're like me, it's not going to be all right. It's going to be extremely difficult. It's going to be a real challenge. It's probably going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. But the rewards are better than I ever imagined possible. I didn't know how good it feels to walk around with some self-respect and dignity and to have a clean conscience and to do things for other people and to create things. All those things that I talked about doing when I was drunk, I've made myself do them because I'll be honest, I'm not very happy with a regular life in sobriety. I've had to go to real lengths to find my happiness and my passion, but I've discovered that it's that challenge where real happiness comes from. And when people ask me, part of where I've gone in this journey is I've become a performer, and people will ask me, how do you're around booze all the time, how do you do that? You perform in places where everybody's drunk. Is that uncomfortable? Is it tempting to you? And I found that those aren't the questions I need to ask myself. The only question I need to ask myself is, am I willing to sober up again? Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Our next storyteller of the evening is T. Pearson, and she has modeled her life on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s mantra that everyone can be great because everyone can serve. She's the founder of Love Advocates LLC, VP of Community Relations for CocoBump.com, multi-VCast co-host, wife, mother, disabled Army veteran, and a bunch of other things. She does it all. And she's wonderful, and she's a survivor, and she's not going to stop. She's working harder, and tonight she's going to share her story.
So what do you get when you mix a lot of trauma, a lot of injuries, and a lot of mental illnesses? Some diagnosed by doctors, some I diagnosed myself, but that's another story. You get a pot of a bunch of foolishness, a pot of a mess, and that is me. Hi, I'm T, and I'm a mess. But my injuries from the military gave the doctors the reason to give me the medicine that I needed, so they say. My trauma was happy that the doctors gave me the medicine that I needed, and my mental illnesses made me believe that I wasn't taking enough. So I had to take more, and according to standards, that made me an addict. So after I tried to fight the addiction with myself, I was like, you know what? This is not going to work. You're going to die. Your daughter's going to find you dead, or somebody else is going to find you dead, and you have so much more to fight for. So I said, you know what? I'm going to kill myself. That was my option. So I tried to kill myself probably about 5 times within a 2-month span. And then I had to go on a little vacation. Some of you guys have probably been there. It's usually the 3rd floor of a hospital. Some call it the mental health ward. You get juice and crayons, but it was the best 2 weeks of my life. And then I was like, you know what? Once the insurance said I was healed and I had to get discharged, I realized I can't listen to the insurance. I have to keep going, and maybe it's time for me to be sober. So I got discharged on a Friday. That Monday, my now husband and I jumped on a plane to go to Florida from Baltimore. And I was like, you know what, you're going to rehab. Anyone who's ever gone to rehab, no, you don't go sober. So I pulls out my lunchbox. I didn't have snacks in it. That was in a book bag. But my meal of choice was pills. So I pull out my lunchbox, and I have all of these different pills and all of these different cocktails because one last hurrah before I go to rehab, right? So I get this cocktail together, and I take all my pills because they give you just enough to take about 12 pills, you know, in your nice standard cup from the airline. So I took my pills, and I doze off, and I'm off to la-la land before I get till I walk into sober land. And kind of like Mike said, I didn't have a problem with my addiction. And I had a problem with getting sober, right? And so I was going to go down fighting. So I'm on the plane, and my automatic clock wake up because us addicts have an automatic clock and when's the next time to feed our addiction, right? So my clock go off, and I wake up, and I look to my right, and Jerome is looking at me, and I feel somebody here, and I look up, and it's the stewardess. So she's like, is everything okay, ma'am? Yes, ma'am, it is. Can I have some more water, please? Because I still had some more pills I had to take before I went into rehab, right? So when she walks off, Jerome says, well, do you know, are you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Why, what's wrong? And I didn't know that I had started to seize in the air. And they were going to do an emergency landing for little old me because they thought I was having a problem. The only problem I had is that I needed some more water so I could take some more pills. So I took some more pills, and I get on the ground, and I get to rehab. And it was beautiful. I'm like, I'm in Florida. I'm going to be able to get a tan. I'm going to be able to swim in a pool and, you know, try this sober thing. It wasn't quite like that. It really wasn't. The outside was really cute. The lobby was really nice. The flowers were real. And then I got in that door that don't open until it's time for you to come back out. And behind the door, I felt like I walked onto the scene of one of my favorite shows, Orange is the New Black. And I was like, oh, man, so this is rehab. And I was like, this can't be real, right? And so when I looked around, I was like, okay, you're one of a handful of people that look like me, a handful of black folks. And I'm like, okay, so this is going to be an interesting experience all the way around. But then the door's locked. And I'm like, well, why the heck are they locking the doors? I asked my roommate, and she's like, oh, they're fighting. Oh, okay. When we're locked on the floor while they're fighting, right? And she's like, yeah, we're fine. But it was the people next door to me, right? And I'm like, oh, man, first night, okay, all right. So then they're like, well, you want some meds? No, I don't need any meds because I still was high, right? My pills hadn't died down yet. I was about 3 doses in, so I was still floating. No, I'm fine. Where's the food? Because I was hungry, right? fluffy tendency, sorry. Um, so I'm like, where's the snacks? I heard we can eat good in rehab. If nothing else, I heard that we eat good in rehab. So I'm like, well, what time is meal time? What time is snack time? And so they're like, no, not yet, this, and this. And so I'm kind of looking around because I'm still kind of high, but I'm still taking in that I'm away from my family. I'm away from my daughter. I'm in this whole foreign state where I didn't have any connections to anybody. And it was a challenge for me. And so it was a stretch even for me last night to think that I went somewhere completely new, but I knew I had to so I can be sober, right? And even though I didn't say the whole 90 days there, because I was like, that's just going to be a bit too much. Because in any addict, we all feel like we're healed, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm good. Just send me home. I'm fine. But in reality, I actually am. In October 17th of this year will be my 4th year of sobriety from no prescription pain pills. And I still have 6 herniated discs. I still have fluid on my brain. I still have all of my military injuries that require medicine, according to the doctors. But I know that my God is a healer, and He has kept me, and He continues to keep me through. And then my daughter, right? Because my daughter kept calling me, and she's like, Mom, they keep saying you wasn't there when I called. And she's like, but I told them I know my mom is there because you need to let me talk to her. And so when you look into a child's eyes, you have to say, you know what, for her, I have to do something different. And so I'm proud to say that I fought through my addiction, even though I laughed about rehab because everybody had their stories of rehab. We can all sit around and kind of chit chat and laugh, but in the moment, it wasn't funny. And I also realized having a conversation with one of my neighbors there is that she told me I didn't look like an addict. And so even in a rehab situation, I had to be questioned of whether I was an addict enough to be there because I didn't look like an addict. And so my challenge is to everyone that's watching and listening that an addict doesn't have a look. An addiction is an addiction. It can be all kinds of addictions, and we're all human. We all deserve grace. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, T. Our next storyteller is Zach Rushkin, who was born in 1997, so he's on the younger end of things. He somehow survived by, he says, eating peaches with creamer and drinking hot sauce and harvesting the energy of his parents by annoying them. He also is an actual filmmaker, and he has his first film coming out in December. So he's a graduate of the Towson Film Program, and we're really grateful to have him here tonight. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning the film, by the way. Just kidding, Mom and Dad. So I started smoking weed in 2014. So I was a sophomore in high school. And back then, it was not a problem for me. I just smoked occasionally with my friends on the weekends. I didn't go to school high, or I didn't smoke all day, every day, or anything like that. It was very much a special occasion kind of thing. And that all changed in 2016, which is the year that I went to college, and also when I decided to take my mental health into my own hands. Meaning that when I got to college, I figured, well, I was always kind of an anxious person in high school, so I'll deal with it. And I called my doctor, and I was like, hey, look, can you prescribe me this drug for anxiety? And he was like, no, I'm not going to do that unless you come in for a visit. And I was like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a lazy college student. So we had a 20-minute conversation over the phone, and he wrote me the prescription, and I picked it up the same day. Well, I started taking this drug, and at the same time, I was still smoking occasionally. But eventually, I started to notice some changes. Every time I smoked, things started to feel more intense. The high became more euphoric. And obviously this was great. It just made me want to smoke more. So I did. But what I didn't realize was that the drug that I was on surpassed the threshold of helping me, and it was sending me straight into mania, which, for those of you who don't know, feels like an amazing cocaine high. all the time. So it was great. I figured this was awesome, and it gave me all the more reason to keep smoking. So I did. And I mean, I smoked more and more, and it started to become more of an issue. Being high was basically my new normal. If I didn't have weed, I became very irritable. This became a huge issue with my parents and my friends. And eventually it hit a literal breaking point where I had a psychotic break, and I experienced both auditory and visual hallucinations, had delusions of grandeur, and I needed to be admitted to a psych ward, which is where I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and also where I learned that crazy high that I was feeling was about to be met with the worst come down of my life. And it was. It was awful. It was about a year's worth of severe depression, like agitated depression. And they couldn't give me antidepressants because they were afraid that would, give me another bipolar episode. So they just put me on mood stabilizers and were like, wait it out, get rest, pretty much. So I was home, and this was during the school year, so all my friends were gone. I was pretty much alone, and but I had weed though, so I started smoking again. And obviously this time it wasn't because I was trying to chase this like manic high. It was because I was trying to cope with the depression that I was dealing with at the time, and it was helpful for that. But it was a short-term solution to this long-term issue, and really just like rolling the dice, because I could have easily had another bipolar episode by doing that. But fortunately I didn't, and with time I started feeling better, and as I felt better, I started smoking less. And luckily I made a full recovery, and by that point weed just became the same thing that it was in the beginning. It was just this recreational thing that was there, that I wasn't depending on anymore. So obviously this is just my story, and I'm not trying to say that weed is bad in general, because I don't think it is. I think it's really helpful for certain people. But what I am saying is that I think it's incredibly complicated, and that it can be very bad for certain people. It definitely was not good for me. And I just think the best thing that we can do is be as honest as we can as the stigma goes away with our doctors and professionals, because they're going to be the ones that will see these changes inside of us. Because, when I was manic, I felt normal. I thought I was fine. Everybody else would tell you I was a completely different person, though. But yeah, I think if we're honest with our doctors about this stuff, they'll be able to hopefully see these changes in us, and then also take action to try and prevent something happening like what happened to me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach. I want to take a minute before we bring on the next storyteller to name all of the partner organizations that have made this evening possible. See, their COVID protocols are in effect. Jewish Community Services, MedStar Health, Catholic Charities, NAMI Metropolitan Baltimore, Behavioral Health System Baltimore, Baltimore Jewish Council, Goucher College, Baltimore Magazine, Creative Alliance, us, the Stoop Storytelling Series, and the Maryland Association for the Treatment of Opioid Dependence. Support is also provided by the Marilyn and David Karp Philanthropic Fund and the Joan G. Klein Fund for Substance Use Disorders. We also have information about where, if you or a loved one is having an issue with substance abuse, you can go to the website or call a number and get help. There is help. Okay. So our next storyteller is Gary Almeter, and he's an attorney. a writer, a former teacher, a bibliophile, an Orioles fan, and all-around bad boy. His second book, The Official Dream Dinner Party Handbook, will be published in October. He lives in Annesley with his wife, 3 kids, and his dog, who is named Dave.
Compared to 2020, navigating 1998 was like frolicking through a meadow. However, when it was happening, it was kind of a bonkers year. The Unabomber was happening, Seinfeld ended. I was in my 20s then, and it felt like every single person I talked to was a millionaire from some sort of .com. And in addition to all that, all anybody talked about when they weren't talking about stock options was Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton's semen, Monica Lewinsky, Monica Lewinsky's dress, Linda Tripp, Ken Starr. The whole year was just, huh? If you had a propensity for needing to escape reality, it was the sort of year that wasn't going to diminish that propensity. In August 1998, my then fiance, now wife, and I moved to New York, and I started teaching high school English at a public school in Manhattan. I came equipped with syllabuses filled with Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Toni Morrison, Henry Louis Gates. I was positive I was going to teach their children their voice and save them from self-annihilation. In my head, it was that thing where one half of you is Sidney Poitier in To Sir with Love, and the other half of you is that thing of when Michelle Pfeiffer says in Dangerous Minds, there are no victims in this classroom. First few months were chaotic and disorienting and exciting and fun and difficult and challenging, but I loved it. I loved being in that world, loved meeting the kids. It was clear, though, that teaching the kids their voice was going to be more difficult than I thought. In addition to all of the regular teenage stuff like the prom and acne and self-esteem, these kids, and they told me this in essays they wrote and stories they wrote, had to deal with so much. Neighborhood violence, rapey uncles, drugs, gangs. It was a lot. December rolled around and the hard days became more frequent. Christmas in New York is really hard for kids. All the Barney's windows and the Rockefeller ice skating rink and the FAO Schwartz and that Mariah Carey song coming out of every orifice can really do a lot to a person when you realize that that's not my life. So when the wedding man called us on our landline and left a message on our answering machine that a band we were considering hiring for our wedding reception was playing a gig at a Christmas party, I was happy to volunteer. The band, Groove Bus, was playing a Christmas party on a Thursday night at Windows on the World at the top of the World Trade Center, North Tower. I took the subway down there, took the elevator upstairs, and it was just surreal. It was a clear night. You could see for hundreds of miles. It was beautiful. Groove Bus played your wedding reception standards, your Donna Summers, your Kool and the Gangs, your Commodores. And everywhere you looked, there was that thing of when the administrative assistant is wearing the earrings with the Christmas present and they're sitting on the sketchy businessman's lap, and something sketchy was happening just everywhere you looked. So it was a perfect place to just get shit-faced. And when I wanted to feel fancy and get shit-faced, I drank gin and tonics. I drank a ton, and details are fuzzy, but at some point, took the elevator back down to the subway, hopped on the 4, 5, or 6 train, took it back uptown, passed out, pissed my pants, and ended up walking around the Bronx at around 1 a.m. I must have gotten kicked off the train. I didn't have an extra pass. I didn't have any money. Every place was closed. My piss-soaked jeans were starting to freeze to my leg. And just as I was about to get frightened, I heard somebody say, "Mr. Gary?" So I look around, and there's a student of mine, a student Caesar, and he's standing in the doorway of this laundromat, and he says, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "What are you doing here?" He explained to me that at night, he washes his mom works 2 jobs, and at night he washes his mom's uniforms so she can take the uniform for her second job to work with her at her first job. It was clear he knew the state I was in, so he said, "Why don't I take you home?" So the dryer bell dinged. We walked to his house. He ran upstairs, woke up his uncle. His uncle comes downstairs, and just as nonchalantly as you would in normal circumstances, he said, "Hi, Mr. Gary, nice to meet you." So the 3 of us walked to the uncle's car, and I just opened the door, and this is what always sticks with me. I didn't ask if he had a plastic bag I could sit on or a magazine. I just plopped down in my piss-soaked jeans in his car, and he drove me home. I went home, threw my jeans in the garbage chute, got a few hours of sleep, woke up, and was convinced my life as I knew it was over. I was going to get fired, the wedding was going to be off. I knew what I would have done in high school had I seen my English teacher in the state that I was in. Although my high school English teacher was a nun, so that would have been, anyway. Walked to school, first period, second period. Caesar walked into my third period class, nodded, I nodded back, and that was it. He didn't tell anybody. And then, so you know that thing of when teachers say, "The kids are teaching me more than I'm teaching them," and you're like, "You're full of crap, I'm teaching them more." Well, in this case, Caesar really did teach me more than I taught him. I learned that I was probably never going to be the sophisticated New Yorker that I thought I was destined to be. I learned that I was neither Sidney Poitier in To Sir with Love or Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds. I wasn't even Sandy Bullock in The Blind Side. The kids were saving me. I was more like Walter Matthau in Bad News Bears. And in my head, I was really kind of like Hans Gruber in Die Hard, or the villain in 1998's highest grossing film, Titanic, Cal Hockley. I was convinced I was just a shitty person. And that's what shame does. And I had always conflated guilt and shame. But I learned guilt is when you do something bad. You say, "Oh, I did something bad. I got over it." Shame is when you do something bad and you tell yourself you did it because you were a shitty person. And I was convinced, after the entitlement it took to sit on this guy's seat in piss-soaked jeans, the shame from what I did that Thursday night, the shame from the whiplash of realizing I was not who I thought I was. The only way to overcome that really was to forget about it and to keep drinking, which lasted for a few years until I started telling people the story. And I guess in today's parlance, it's called leaning into your shittiness or owning it. But once you start telling people the story, you can't be ashamed that I couldn't be ashamed that I was a shitty person anymore, because if you tell the person the story and they're still standing there, then they might not think you're so shitty, which is helpful. Another thing that happened is you tell somebody the story and they would say, oh, that happened to me once too. Or, and this might say more about me, but a lot of people, that happens to me all the time. In fact, at this point, when I meet somebody and they haven't pissed their pants on a New York City subway or a transportational vessel of any kind, I'm like, what's wrong with you? Caesar's a grown-up now. He's married and has kids. He does the same job his uncle did back in 1998, which is asbestos abatement. I'm not certain I taught him his voice. I'm not certain I taught him anything, even though he got an A that year. But he does know that he did change my life as I knew it, and I'm very grateful for that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gary. That was a really beautiful and illuminating story, and we can never look at you the same way again, and I'm sorry. So before we move forward with our final storytellers, we want to have another song from Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon. This has been a real delight for all of us to be in this very sacred, safe space and to hear your beautiful music. For those of you who don't know Jeremiah, he's from Catonsville. You are from Catonsville. Yes.
Yeah.
And you were on American Idol, which I don't think a lot of people in Catonsville get to say that. And nor do I think a lot of people in Catonsville, not to say anything negative about Catonsville, get to say that they did a duet with Cynthia Erivo, who is an amazing actress. If you don't know her, she was the lead in the movie Harriet. She was on The Outsider on HBO, and she's just an amazing performer. So it's a real honor and treat to be able to say, here is Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon.
Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. Bluebirds singing a song, nothing but bluebirds all day long. Never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right. Noticing the days hurrying by when we're in love, my how they fly. My how they fly. Blue days, all of them gone, nothing but blue skies from now on. Bluebirds singing a song up in the blue sky. All I see are blue skies. Blue skies. From now on.
Thank you so much for the beautiful music, Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon. Please follow him, seek him out, and support his music. So our next storyteller is Elizabeth Piper, and she's a lovely young woman who enjoys storytelling, speaking words of affirmation to her plants, and finding joy in things like fresh baked bread, Gilmore Girls, dance parties, and evening strolls. She lives in a cozy studio with her one-eyed kitten, Gizmo, and she makes sense of her world by writing and speaking about her experiences, which is what she's going to be doing this evening.
So my mom was one of those people that when she got excited about something, you couldn't help but feel excited too. Like just being close to her made you feel her magnetism, and she could make the most simple thing sound like the world's best thing. Looking back, I realize it's one of the things I actually kind of enjoyed about her bipolar diagnosis, really high highs. And one of the things my mom loved was the Oscars. She got extremely excited about the Oscars. Therefore, I loved the Oscars. And when she would talk about why she loved it, she would say, you know, the red carpet is amazing. And when Steve Martin hosts, and he's so captivating and funny, and you kind of just wish he was your dad. And the women and the dresses, and how they wore the dresses, and so much talent in one room. So my mom and I would always watch the Oscars. In 2003, we actually got invited to an Oscars party. Now, when you like the Oscars, getting invited to an Oscars party is pretty damn exciting, especially when you're Barbara Piper. So I was 12, it was 2003. We got dressed and went over to one of my best friend, Leah's house, where her mother and her were hosting the Oscars party. And we walked in, and there were some girls that I knew from school, and some moms that my mom knew, and some unfamiliar faces as well. And we walked in, and I remember I looked over to my right, and it was Leah's dining room. And there were lots of yummy snacks on the table. There were vegetables and hummus, there were chips and salsa, and pigs in a blanket, soda for the girls, and wine for the moms. And I looked to my left, and most of my friends were in the living room talking about the upcoming school dance and whether or not Chicago would win all the awards at the Oscars that night. And I remember feeling envious of the girls because they had this blissful ignorance about them. They could look at a bottle of wine and just see it as a bottle of wine. But I looked at a bottle of wine, and I looked back at my mom, and I thought, shit, something bad could happen. Now, my mom was such an exceptional person. I mean, my friends still talk about her to this day as being one of those fun moms that you just couldn't get enough of. I mean, she was vivacious. She was a storyteller, and she had stories about traveling through Europe in her 20s and serving in the military in her 30s when she was pregnant with my brother. And she said, you know, if I meet a man when I was younger, I said, if I meet a man, Elizabeth, I'll marry him. And if I don't, that's okay too. I'll live a glorious life, you know, full of travel and friends and laughter. But she met my dad, obviously, and, you know, her accomplishments kept growing. She had a family, got 2 master's degrees from Hopkins. I mean, she was exceptional. So I always kind of saw her as wearing this cape. But when I was in the room and the wine was there and my mom was there, I knew that there was a chance, a good chance, that that cape could come off. And what it would be replaced with was something so ugly, I wanted no one to see it. It was our family secret. They couldn't see it. And then I said, okay, well, there is that small chance that something bad won't happen. And there's been 1 or 2 times when she can have a glass or 2 and be fine and stop. And maybe it's one of those times. I tried to calm myself down. I didn't want anyone else to know that something could be wrong. And so the night progressed, and the Oscars began, and I noticed, drink by drink, my mom's wine glass would keep filling itself up. And I realized about an hour into the night she had basically a bottle of wine. And so my nerves were very heightened. And so the Oscars continued, and we were all in the living room watching. And now this was 2003, right? Our country, we're at war. It's after September 11th. George W. Bush is the president. And Michael Moore is nominated for an Oscar. So you put Michael Moore nominated for an Oscar, a bottle of wine deep, and my mom, God bless her soul, hardcore Fox News loving Republican, this is the recipe for disaster. So Michael Moore gets announced as a nomination, and he wins for his work with Bowling for Columbine. And one of the other mothers says, "Oh, I just love him and I agree with all of his politics." And he's talking about how George W. Bush shouldn't be the president and we should be ashamed of it as a country. And my mom starts boiling. And before I know it, she stands up, looks at the TV, and says, "You are nothing but a goddamn liberal." Picks up her bag and says, "Elizabeth, we're fucking leaving," and storms out the door. Now, in my family, being called a goddamn liberal is an insult, let me tell you, or it was back in the day. Someone cuts you off in traffic, liberal. Michael Moore, liberal. I don't think he'd be offended. I wouldn't be offended today. So in that moment, she leaves and I am left there, and the daughter's eyes are on me and the mom's eyes are on me, and I see in their eyes that they are full of sadness and confusion and that feeling of I have no idea what to say or do, and I am 12 years old. And as I'm standing there and I apologize for the scene that my mom just caused, because I felt like it was my responsibility, a reflection of me, and I excuse myself and I walk out the door. And I think in that moment, well, it wasn't clear to me then, but now it's so clear to me that, well, yes, I was a fool of shame for my mom and her disease, and shame for me being that young and having to deal with that situation. I think what makes me more sad than anything is that my whole life with my mom, the 22 years that I had her on this planet, all I wanted was for people to see her in the Cape, to see the one who traveled to Europe by herself, the military serving veteran, the charismatic woman that could make anyone laugh and bake you brownies when you're sad and rub your back when you're sick. I wanted them to see that version of her, but they wouldn't. All they were going to see was the ugliness of her disease. And that's what makes addiction so terrible, is that the things that people do with it are so ugly that it's hard to forget. But now here I am, 30 years old, 7 years after I lost my mom to addiction, and I realized one of the reasons I think we loved the Oscars, one of the reasons I love the Oscars still to this day, love the Oscars, is that it's sort of like that one night where people have a magical red carpet and they put on a beautiful dress and they're happy and they get awards and then they go to parties and have a great time, or at least that's what it seems like from our television sets. And I think for one night you get to wear a cape. And that's what I always tried to hold the memory of my mom as, not the ugliness of the disease, but the cape of everything else that she was. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All of the storytellers have agreed to answer questions at the end of the show. So any of you who would like to ask questions of the storytellers, please post them to YouTube Live or Facebook Live, and we will get them to the storytellers after the show. Our next storyteller is Zuriel Savoy, who is affectionately known as Z. And he was born in Washington, D.C. He's the oldest of 6 boys. He graduated from PG County Schools, and he attended Morgan State University. He's a U.S. Army Airborne veteran and the father of 3 sons. He likes telling jokes, singing karaoke, writing poetry, rooting for D.C. sports teams, and speaking at various substance use disorder treatment facilities. He's been working in the field of recovery for the past 6 years, and he's currently an employee with St. Mary's County Health Department.
Good evening. So I had my first drink at the age of 7. It wasn't given to me. I actually snuck it out of my grandfather's mini fridge that he had in his garage. But for that, it was a 8-ounce little Miller Pony. And I actually liked it. So I look forward to going over Pop's house. That's what I call my grandfather. It didn't affect my upbringing, though, as a child. I was involved in the local rec center in sports, football, baseball. Coming up, pretty good in both sports. So much so that I played both in high school. I was better at baseball, more natural at baseball. And my high school baseball team was one of the best in the state when I was in high school. One of the benefits of being one of the best high school teams in the state is that when we had home games, we get dismissed a little bit early so that we can get ready for the game. I lived exactly 1 mile from my high school, and I drove. So one particular day, district game, we get dismissed early, and a few of my teammates and I, we decide that after we go on and get our stuff together, that we gather back and we have a couple refreshments before the game. Now, I don't know how they felt about it or anything like that, but I had 2 beers, and I did not drink them like normal people drink beers. I didn't pop the top and just drink it. I popped the top, poked a hole in the bottom, and I shotgunned them. But then I also had to have a shot of alcohol to go along with it. My stepfather at the time had a bar, so I was able to get a little liquor to go along with that. Made our way back to the school, got ready for the game. Warm-ups and everything went just fine. Little did I know that it was going to be one of the hottest days of the season. And the heat in combination with the alcohol just intensified my intoxication. I know for a fact I had one of the worst games of the season. Batting was off because my hand-eye coordination was off. Running the bases was off. The one hit that I did have was supposed to be a double. Ended up being a single because I can't round first like I'm supposed to make it to second base. Catching the pop flies weren't as difficult because if you see 3 objects, just catch the one in the middle. However, grounders, I played left field. And when you're intoxicated, your balance is a little off. So if there are 3 objects coming, you're moving, and you're not moving straight, those 3 become 6, so which one do you field? Needless to say, we won the game. Sweating profusely, alcohol coming out of us and everything else. Shook hands, ended up going back into the locker room. Changed out, coach wanted to see us. We got scolded in his office, told to never let that happen again. We answered accordingly. Yes, sir, coach, it won't happen again. He had some assurance that it wouldn't happen again because we weren't allowed to leave early, that's all. We had to bring our uniforms to school and we could just dress in the locker room. Some of my other teammates just gave up the drinking altogether, but not me. I still continued to find a party on the weekend or anything like that. Because I'm 16 years old. I'm not stopping drinking at 16, right? Still young. It's what you do when you're young. Fast forward a little bit. I go on, I make good grades, still a decent athlete. I get accepted to multiple colleges. And the college I picked was Morgan State University, as it was said. But there's a reason why I attended Morgan State University and not graduated Morgan State University. I went to Morgan State University because at that time they had a 9-to-1 female to male ratio. I graduated high school at the age of 17. You telling me there are 9 females with my name on it? I'm going to go find them. Sorry, Grandma. She's an educator. So I did. I attended Morgan State University, and I attended for a year. The reason why I attended for a year is because academically, I was okay. But my attendance in the classes, I would go just so they could check me off as being there, get my assignment. That's it. Turn it in. I go for exam times, and that was it. I pissed a whole bunch of professors off and everything because they said I had a whole bunch of potential. That's not what I was there for at that time. Again, I'm looking for the other 9 and partying. I left Morgan State University and joined the military. Basic training was the longest 90 days because you can't do nothing, right? You drinking water. You can't even drink Kool-Aid. I don't know about now, but when I went in, you couldn't drink Kool-Aid. You had water and more water. You could barely taste your food. You just put it in, swallow it, that's it, let's go. But then I got to my AIT, which was Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And I'm 19 years old. And when I got there, on the installation, you could drink because their policy was if you were young enough to die for your country, then you're young enough to have a drink. There was no age limit. You were in uniform, you on the installation, you could have it. So I'm in heaven because now I done found people like myself. So it became a routine that carried on throughout my military career, where you go to work, you do what you're supposed to do. When you get off work, you go out, you sit. If you needed counseling, you met at the bar, and you had your counseling. Therapy sessions, that was your therapy session. Anything that didn't make a difference. Relationship guidance, all of that. You get all of that there. At least that's how it worked for me. I was right at home because it was more so of me rewarding myself. I worked hard, so I felt I had earned the right. So then by the age I was where it was legal, I'm able to go and get my own. Oh, it's nothing now. Now I'm not just confined to any one installation. Now I can go anywhere and have something to drink. And in the military, it's okay, just so long as the mission is being completed. Whether I was overseas or CONUS, continental United States, I carried that with me. When I got out of the military, that's where it became more difficult because, like has been said already before by some of the other storytellers, see, I didn't have a problem with my drinking. Everybody else did, though. So my problem was you asking me, did I have a problem? or asking me more than one time, am I okay? So it continued into my civilian life where I had to have something exciting to do because I've left the military. That didn't work out too well. In 2012, because of my drinking and my alcoholism, I ended up with 2 DUI arrests in a 6-month span and still didn't stop drinking. I would later be convicted of the second one and given some time in jail on that. And I'll come back to that in a little bit later. March 5th, 2013. My phone rings. I'm on my way to work. And it says, Grandma. And I answer the phone. Good morning, Grandma. She says, hey, Zuriel. Mom's gone. I said, okay. I'm on my way. As the oldest, I know I have to get there. When I get there, the officers don't know who I am, so they don't want to let me in. My mother passed away at night. So it's in the morning when I arrive, and they don't want to let me in her home. But I'm explaining to them, I haven't had anything to drink. So I'm explaining to them, this is my mother that's on the floor. Let me see my mother. My grandmother hears me, and she explains to them, let him in. He's the oldest. When I get in, we have a sidebar conversation. And she says, baby, you my firstborn grandson. I'm going to need you. Yes, ma'am. No, I need you to promise me. Yes, ma'am. I knew what she meant. So I was to go and prepare to bury my mother with the rest of my family as well, and their help. But do it without drinking. Now, my grandmother is the one person on this earth that if I give my word to her, it's very difficult for me to break. So the physical act of not drinking was not difficult. But the mental aspect, and those of you dealing with alcoholism or who have ever dealt with alcoholism know that the way it plays with our minds or any substance use disorder, it will tell you, yo, you need me to get through this. I know what you told your grandmother, but hey, one won't hurt. So I had to deal with that talk in what I like to call this neighborhood up here with a bunch of derelicts with no adult supervision. So we get my mom's service, beautiful. Cemetery, leave the cemetery, go to repast, eat a little bit, say my goodbyes to everybody, hop in my vehicle, leave. Very first stop. I know, just like I'm standing here now, and I'm speaking to you now, that my mother was not in the ground good before I was at the drive-through window buying a fifth of New Amsterdam peach, because now I got to cope. I'm grieving, and it's my time. I could not wait. It kills me. I did that. And I went on a 45-day run where that fifth of New Amsterdam did not touch empty at all. As I said a little bit earlier, I was convicted on a second DUI. Because I was gainfully employed, I was given weekends. I'm the type of alcoholic that will try to find a way around anything. Too smart for my own good is what I'm saying. So you report on Fridays. Okay, that's cool. You get discharged on Sunday. No problem. That means I could drink Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Needless to say, I reported drunk, had to do straight time, got released, ended up going to my son's high school football game, intoxicated. All I'm saying is, from the age of 16 to the age of 40, that's how long it took, 24 years gap, for me to realize that denial is not just a river in Egypt. It is a way of living when you're dealing with alcoholism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Z. So we are now come to the time for our final storyteller. Before, I just wanted to say a thank you to our storyteller sponsors. They are providing nice gifts for the storytellers tonight who have come out here to share. They are from, excuse me, I am really like rattled. I think all these stories are so heavy and like my brain is just like processing them. So let me just be a little bit real here. It's a lot, right? It's a lot. And thank you for being here tonight. So, all right, back to our sponsors. Our sponsors are the Charmery, which is an amazing ice cream place, and Babies on Fire, a coffee shop that we highly recommend. Both those have 2 wonderful locations throughout the city. We have Falconham's Hardware, which is in Hamden, and then a Conscious Corner, which is out in Clarksville and has been around for a long time and includes the Great Sage restaurant. So without further ado, our last storyteller for the evening is Kelly Gill. Kelly is just a force to be reckoned with. I love this woman. She's got a powerful energy, and she's a writer and a Baltimore native and a mother, and here's her story.
My son Randy moved to Florida when he was 27 as part of a continuing recovery program. He had gotten sober here in Baltimore and thought it would be a good idea to continue his recovery in a sister program that they had down in Florida. And he enjoyed quite a bit of success, both in his life and in his recovery, and built a pretty great life for himself down in Florida. And around the 8th year or so, 10th, maybe somewhere between the 8th and 10th year that he lived down there, it was abundantly clear that he had relapsed. So I had a lot of denial, and it's very easy to lie to your mom when you live in another state. But one day I got a private message on social media from someone who said, "I know you don't know me, and I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out to you. I don't think your son has as much time as he thinks he does. I actually think he's going to die. My name is Kelly, and I found you because he told me his mom's name was Kelly too. And in that moment, any shred of denial that I was still holding on to about how sick Randy was completely shredded. And I was really excited that this woman wasn't going to let him go down without bringing in reinforcements. And I finally had eyes on the ground down in Florida. So we quickly became friends, and we quickly started to covertly find ways that we could save his life and get him back into recovery. She finally found him. She called me one day and said, I can't reach him. Some guy named Peanut has his phone, and I know that's not that guy's real name. That has to be the name of a drug addict, and we can't find him anywhere. She drove around for hours, and finally she found him in a convenience store. And he said, "Thank God you're here. I need your phone. I have to call your mother. That poor woman probably thinks I'm dead." She was scared to give him her phone because then my phone number would show up and he would realize what she'd been up to. So she asked him for the number, she dialed it, and he called me. And he said, "Ma, I know you've been worried about me. I lost my phone, but I am fine." He was anything but fine. Within a few weeks, we were able to convince him to come to Baltimore and get back into recovery, and I had a short window. My plan was to fly down there, get him, fly him back. So I flew down there, and as soon as I landed, I called him to say, I'm here to save your life." And he said, "You know what, I'm not ready. I have a lot of work to do. If you could just maybe go get yourself some lunch, I'll be ready in a little bit." And I had a really bad feeling. I choked down a Caesar salad with some dry chicken on it and quickly called him back and said, "Okay, we're going to go. We're going to go back to Baltimore now." And he said, "Mom, I'm not going to make it. I'm so busy." And I said, "I need to see you. I'm not leaving Florida without seeing you." And he said, "Great, bring cigarettes and a pizza, please." So I went to the place where he was living, which was an empty warehouse. He had a small office off to the side with whatever he had managed to save jammed in there. And there was a small bathroom in the far corner of the warehouse. And as he walked towards me, I was kind of stunned. He was emaciated. And he said, "Sorry, I have so much work." And I could look beyond him and see there was no work. You know, his work was acquiring crack cocaine and lying a lot. And that's a full-time job. I left him, and I think I cried all the way to the airport and all the way home, and probably until I fell asleep that night. But I did get him home 4 days later, and when he arrived at my house, he slept for 3 days. He got up only to grab food almost like a zombie and to go to the bathroom, and that was it. But on day 4, we had an agreement that we were finally going to get him in treatment, and I was pretty excited about that. So on the morning of day 4, I was a little surprised at 5 o'clock in the morning that he was up and so ready to go get help. So I came downstairs to the family room where I heard the TV, but I spotted my shoes by the back door. The backs were broken, they were muddy and wet. And I looked at him and I said, "Did you walk down the street in my shoes?" And he said, "Yeah. You know, they don't sell drugs on Schwartz Avenue anymore." And I said, "No, they don't sell drugs on Schwartz Avenue anymore." And then I realized his demeanor was a little off, and it occurred to me, I had thought to get all the drugs out of my house, but I had not remembered to get all the alcohol out of my house. And I ran downstairs, and I saw all the bottles lined up, and I touched them, and they were empty. So I came back upstairs and said, "You ready? You ready to go to treatment? You ready today?" And he said, "You know what? Today's not feeling like a good day." And I said, "Honey, we have a deal. I can't have a crack addict living in my home, and you're here to get sober, so let's just do it." And he said, I don't think it was a good idea for me to come home. I'm probably gonna have to go back to Florida." And I said, "No, it's okay. It's okay. Let's go get clean. Let's get you clean." it's amazing how, as the mother of someone with an addiction, we really want to fix that. We really, really want to fix that, and we can't. So he said, no, I'm not ready. I think it's best I go back to Florida. Actually, I'll get clean in Florida. I want to be with my sponsor. I want to be with my friends down there. I know what I need to do. And just, if I can't stay here for a few days and chill out, then send me back. And I was pissed. And I promptly made arrangements for him to fly back in a few hours. And when I walked out of the room to do that. And when I walked back in, he said, Mom, do you think you could cut my hair? And it was about 7:30 in the morning, and we walked out on the deck. I had never cut my 38-year-old child's hair in my life. The grass was just glistening, and you could smell the becoming of fall. It was October. And he sat down in a chair, and one of his favorite things was always, ever since he was a little boy, was for me to rub his head. And I rubbed his head and I cut his hair. And in that moment, we were just a mom and her son. He wasn't suffering from addiction, and I wasn't suffering from fear and the powerlessness. It was a really beautiful moment. And what I knew and he knew was, regardless of this illness of a substance abuse disorder, there was great love. I didn't feel shame for myself or for him. And when we were finished, we got in the car, and I grabbed his hand, and all the way to BWI, I kept saying, you can change your mind. You can change your mind. And he kept saying, I know, Mom. I know, but it's really best for me to go back to Florida. So we hugged each other tightly at the airport, and he got back on the plane. And as soon as he landed in Florida, he sent me a text that said, I never should have left. Thank you for everything, Mom. I really love you. I'm going to be fine. And a year later, he was found dead from an overdose, crack cocaine and fentanyl. And a lot transpired in that year. But the best thing about that year is that he knew he was loved, and I knew he loved me. And I was able to co-found with a friend a nonprofit organization called Love in the Trenches, because we know that parents who have children with substance abuse disorders are walking in the trenches. And we are here to provide support no matter what the outcome, because when you are an addict, there are only two outcomes: recovery or death. At Love in the Trenches, we're here to walk you through that with great love. And you can find us at loveinthetrenches.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this evening of stories. We're especially appreciative to the storytellers who came here and shared their personal tales in the hopes that their stories would connect and inspire and give hope to people out there listening online.
There are a lot of resources that are provided by the partner organizations who made this show a reality tonight. So if you or someone you love are experiencing any pain related to substance abuse or just general mental health pain, please, there are many resources and organizations out there that are able to provide help. We want to thank those who helped us tonight make this possible. So Luke Spicknell and Aaron Curtis and Julianne Franz and Adam Cook and Josh Kahn. All of you are wonderful, and we're very, very grateful for all of the support and keeping us safe and the wheels rolling. And we are going to have a question and answer with the storytellers, but before we do, we're going to have one last song from Jeremiah.
And before we hear from Jeremiah, we also just want to say thank you for tuning in. We know that listening to the Stoop or watching the Stoop online is not like being in the same room, and we look forward to the day when we can all gather again to share stories. But until that time, we're committed to keep bringing you the stories from the Stoop. And our show next month is on October 15th, and it's a partner show with the Baltimore Museum of Industry, and we'll be broadcasting live from the museum. The theme of the show is invisible labor, stories about people working in jobs out of the limelight or whose efforts are ignored or unrecognized. So we're seeking storytellers for that show, and we invite you all to tune in and share some stories with us on October 15th. But for now, we're going to have another song from Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon, and then we're going to tackle your questions here for the storytellers. Thanks again.
I lost myself on a cold, damp night. Gave myself in that misty light. I was hypnotized by a strange delight. Under a lilac tree, I made wine from the lilac tree. Put my heart in its recipe. It makes me think what I want to think. Be who I want to be. But I think more than I ought to think. I do things I never should do. I drink much more than I ought to drink, because it brings me back you. Lilac wine is sweet and heady, like my love. Lilac wine, I feel unsteady. Where's my love? Listen to me. Why is everything so hazy? Isn't that she? Or am I just going crazy? Lilac wine is sweet and heady, like my love. Lilac wine, I feel unsteady. Where's my love? Listen to me. not see clearly. Isn't that she coming near me? Là des coins, I feel steady. For my
Thank you again. Okay, so our first question for our first storyteller, this is a question for Elizabeth Piper. What could have helped you as a young girl dealing with a parent who is an alcoholic? What could have helped you as a young girl dealing with an alcoholic parent?
Yeah, so it's something I think about a lot. I was extremely fortunate to have a father who was not struggling with addiction. And when my mom, was good, she was good, right? But when she was intoxicated, my father was always, my superhero. He, when things got bad, sometimes my dad actually had to take us out of the house into hotels in the middle of the night when I was as young as second grade, believe it or not. And I remember we'd be at the hotel and my dad would just sit me down and he'd be like, I know this sucks. And I know that none of your friends are dealing with it. And it doesn't make sense. But all I know is that you are so resilient and you're so strong and we're going to get through it together. And so for me, the person that helped me was my father, just being that force of light and resilience and leading by example. Now, I realize not everyone has that. So the most important thing I think to remember, I heard this when I was back in college when I was listening to a speaker, and she said, it's not just the addict who's in recovery. The family is in recovery too. And for some people that might seem obvious. To me, at 20 years old, I was like, oh my God, I'm in recovery because I lived with an alcoholic. And recovery can look like Al-Anon and support groups, but I think it also can look like, we've heard some of the addicts in recovery speak about finding their passions and finding light that didn't involve getting intoxicated. So I was, holding on to sports and extracurriculars and anything that had the slightest potential of giving me joy. So I think if you have a parent, great. If you don't have a parent that's present, finding some kind of support system, teacher, aunt, uncle, neighbor, and then also just locking on to anything that brings you joy.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, our second question is for Zach. And the question is, looking back, do you think you were using weed to self-medicate and try to control your bipolar?
I think that was definitely a part of it. The thing is, part of, I wouldn't say with everybody with bipolar disorder, but for me, I experienced a lot of delusions. And one of those was that I can control my bipolar disorder with weed and with alcohol. So I think in that way I was, but medicate is definitely like a iffy term because I certainly was just fueling that manic high that I was feeling the whole time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And this third question is for Zuriel or Z. And the question is, what could your baseball coach have done when he caught you drunk at the game? What could he have done to make a bigger impact or to maybe put you on a different path?
Okay, so one, probably inform my mom or my stepfather. The other would have been to bench me or remove me from the team. Outside of that, though, where my mind was at the time, I don't think it was much more than that could have been done as far as for an impact. You know, as far as impacting me continuing to drink. So.
Can I ask a quick follow-up, which is,
Sure.
at any point in those 24 years, do you feel like there was something that would have made 24 years 12 years or 10 years, or was it this was the path you had to go on?
So there were moments, I like to call them speed bumps, right? Where it would just slow me down. It wasn't as aggressive, but it was still progressive. So no, it took what it took. And much like T touched on, my God knew that I was going to die. I firmly believe that, and that's why it took 24 years, though. It took 24 years because I had already hit so many bottoms, and I'm searching past the bottom, trying to get out of it. And my God said, no, wait a minute. I have to raise it so it can smack you, for lack of a better word. And that's what it did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This question is for Gary. So you can't see, there's an elaborate thing going on with Julianne is wiping down each mic. Everyone's trying to figure out when to take your mask off. So if you're an epidemiologist right now, you're probably freaking out. But I promise you, up to this point, we had it together. So Gary, your question. Had your student busted you, might you have confronted your drinking earlier?
Short answer, definitely not. Like alcohol kills people. It's powerful. Speaking hypothetically about that Thursday in December, had he, said, hey, everybody, Mr. Gary, peed his pants. And, I didn't break any laws, and there was definitely like this ethos of, you work hard, you play hard. And, we had a union that, you could, do anything and not lose your job. So it would have blown over. But also, speaking non-hypothetically, later that year, I chaperoned the prom, and I don't remember chaperoning the prom. And that Monday, I talked to another teacher. I was like, yeah, I was wasted at the prom. He's like, yeah. I'm like, I don't remember being there. And then it was, ha, 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 we work hard, we play hard. And then later, a picture surfaced of me getting high in the bathroom with two students. And I was like, I don't remember, But it was just, oh dear, it's at the end of the year. We work hard, we play hard. It's the end of the year. So, that's it. So,
wow.
No.
Clear. Thank you for that very candid answer. All right. So, Mike, this is for you. All right. Hi. Okay, so I actually have a question too for you. But was there a time when your sobriety was tested, and what did you do? If so, what did you not do to not give in?
Since I really made the decision to get sober, I've never really seriously considered drinking again. I've been tempted by other substances here and there, but for whatever reason, I've just always been able to play the tape all the way through. or I guess young people now have no idea what that means, but to play the YouTube video to the end when they ask you to mash the like button. And, I don't know. I've never been seriously tempted, honestly.
And then this is just as a comedian, did you ever worry that that you wouldn't be as funny when you were sober?
Well, I never performed drunk. I did like the opposite of like the normal story. Like I got sober and then I started performing, and that wasn't until like 7 or 8 years into sobriety. I kind of had like a weird thing where I got sober and I did all the stuff I was supposed to do, like I went back to school and I got the right girlfriend and I was like, on a good trajectory. And it probably like 6 or 7 years in, I was like, I am not happy. And so that's when I started performing. So I'm the same amount of not funny either way, I think.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
You're very funny, actually. And T, this one is for you. All right. What do you share with your daughter about your addiction and subsequent sobriety? And how would you respond to your daughter expressing interest in using, drinking, or smoking?
Rock out. It's like, no. Such a joke. So what was the first part?
So basically, how much of your
My brain
story
cells
does your
haven't
daughter
drew back
know?
all the way. So
How much of your story does your daughter know?
she knows everything.
Okay.
And so I felt it was important to share with my daughter everything about not everything. Not everything. She's watching now, so not everything. But enough for her to know who I am as her mom. And so I often kind of look at the world of like, at some point we're going to be history, and like my grandkids are going to be trying to figure out who their grandmother is. And so I never want her to kind of have to make up who I am. And she needs to know just who I am completely so she can know who she is and where she comes from. And like Elizabeth was saying, and I didn't really realize until just now actually, that my daughter's in recovery too. And my whole village and everyone else that kind of had to go through my time with me. And like for her, it's actually her and everybody else to kind of tell me about how I was as an addict, because I don't remember. I don't remember some of the things I said, some of the things I did. And so, we're in this recovery thing together.
Thank you.
There was a second part, I'm done.
Well, how would you respond if she wanted to?
Use drugs? We would communicate about it. I like to think that we would communicate about it first. Peer pressure's a bitch, and, sometime it comes. And she knows that this is her path. This is her journey through life. I'm just her mom to guide her. And she's going to make her decisions whatever way it is. But at least if she see that it ain't all that it's cracked up to be from her mama, then, it'll stop her from doing some of that stuff.
Right. Thank you.
Hopefully, yeah.
So get rid of one for Kelly because it was so late. I don't have one for Kelly.
Kelly, I have a question for you. What, in the wake of your son's death, what has been the thing that has brought you the most comfort? What's brought you the most comfort in a terrible, terrible time?
I have other children, so there's that. We were really close. We fought a lot. We loved a lot. Actually, before he died, I went down to see him, and he was kind of a jerk to me on the phone a couple of days before, and I have a text on my phone that says, and that he sent 3 days before he died. Hey, Mom, I'm sorry I was such a jerk to you today. I really can't wait to have my mom here. And I also have a text message that he sent me on my birthday 3 summers ago that I play every year on my birthday. But Love in the Trenches, this is not a shameless self-promotion.
No.
Love in the Trenches is really about parents who are in the trenches. And I do know that if we can eradicate the shame around this disease and lead with love, we can do a lot of good for a lot of people, because other parents will lose their children. While we want everyone to get into recovery, not everyone will. And so it's just really important that we know that we lead with love. And I'm very comforted by that. My child stopped suffering. He wasn't getting better. And we loved each other a lot.
Thank you. Thanks again to everybody who was part of this show, for everybody who watched this show, and please keep sharing your stories. And we look forward to seeing you at our next show. And just a big, big, big extra thanks to the storytellers for sharing tonight. Good night, everybody.
Good night.